Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Hello, my name is Bradford Lynn, and I'm a junior analyst with the CREtech Global Innovation Consulting practice. As someone who is very passionate about the real estate technology sector, I'm proud to be serving as the MC for today's critically important webinar. I'm also a longtime supporter and fan of CREtech and appreciate their team inviting guest MCs like myself to host their webinars. This is another terrific way for CREtech team and how they're supporting and encouraging the next generation of real estate tech leaders. So tomorrow, don't miss the Next Generation Office Experiences webinar presented by JIL Technologies at 2 p.m. Eastern. And check out all of our upcoming events, including our BI Summit in January and next virtual demo day at cretech.com/events. And now I would like to introduce today's moderator, Chris Lingiza, Senior Director, Business Development at Procore.
Thanks a lot, and really appreciate the introduction, Bradford, and super excited to be here today as well. So my name is Chris Lingiza, as Bradford mentioned. I am the Senior Director of Business Development at Procore and have what I think is one of the coolest jobs out there. I get to deal with technology that is impacting the construction and real estate market. I get to spend a lot of time with third-party software vendors that are integrating into Procore, but it also gives me a really great glimpse into what's happening in the technology space. Some of the most emerging tech, some of the steadfast technologies that have been around for a long time. And I also came from industry. I spent about 15 years in the construction industry before I came to work for Procore. So this is a pain point or an opportunity, depending on how you look at it, that is near and dear to my heart. So today we're here to talk a bit about what is actually happening with technology in the construction space and how companies are adopting that technology. What are some of the bigger trends that are happening? As many of you know, there's a lot of new technology coming into the space. In the last several years, there will be several thousand new technology startups that have joined the construction space. So there's a lot of options and there's a lot of opportunity. And the real question is how are people using it? What are the things that are getting our panelists excited? What are the things that you should be getting excited about? And how are we going to go ahead and dive into those? So with no further ado, I'm really excited to be joined today by Clelia Peters, Aaron Roberts, and Jarrett Lebono. I'm going to go ahead and give each one of them in that order an opportunity to introduce themselves, but also give you a little bit of insight into why it is that they're really interested in construction technology. Clelia? Clelia, you're still on mute, unfortunately.
Sorry, guys. I was just saying that I'm excited to be here, Chris. And my background touches both on investing and on operating in the real estate space. So got into real estate about 6 years ago, joined my family's residential real estate brokerage, had a more conventional business career prior to that, BCG, MBA. But I got very interested in innovation, helped to co-found Metaprop, and I'm now a venture partner at Bain Capital Ventures, where I focus exclusively on prop tech. And while at BCV, I've definitely been involved in a kind of deep dive effort on our part into the construction tech space. And I'm really excited about construction tech. I mean, I've always seen construction tech as being part of like prop tech writ large, but I also think that right now it shows many of the same signals that the kind of broader prop tech sector did 5 or 6 years ago that really indicated it was like heating up.
Awesome. I'm going to go next to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Chris, and great to be with everybody today, and thanks to CREtech for having me join the webcast today. So my name, as Chris said, is Aaron Roberts. I'm a partner with Ernst & Young, EY, based here in Houston. And for the last 26 years, I've been working with construction contractors and engineers in various capacities. My day job is as an audit partner, and so work with many of our largest construction clients. Obviously EY is known for their audit and tax practice, but we have 300,000 people worldwide and more than 100 countries. And one of our largest service lines is in business consulting. And so I lead a practice across the globe. I'm currently the global leader for our engineering and construction practice, which cuts across all of our service lines. And what really gets me excited about working with our clients in construction today is really this amazing convergence that is occurring, and we're witnessing that firsthand. It's pretty exciting when you can start seeing these various technologies, and we'll talk about them all, I'm sure, on our call today. But starting with things like BIM coming together with reality capture and 5G and cloud technologies, all of these things sort of creating this moment where all of these things can really enhance business performance in a way that we really would not be possible 4 or 5 years ago. And so for me, that idea of convergence and how our clients are really making the best use of those emerging technologies is the area I have the most excitement about. And I think we're really on the front end of a significant investment cycle in producing those great outcomes for an industry as frankly lagged pretty much every other industry in the planet. So look forward to the dialogue today, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. And thanks. And Jarrett, I'll let you go ahead and close this out.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for joining. My name is Jarrett Labono. I'm a member of the consulting team at CREtech, focused on, of course, the construction industry and implementing new technology in all aspects of a workflow that a company wants to. Previously, I've worked in the industry for about 15 years with some of the largest players in real estate, spending half my career on the construction management side, directly dealing with subcontractors, and then the other half dealing on the owner and developer side, on new development as well as occupied buildings. So I've been focused in New York City, have worked for JLL and Hines, and I believe that being on both sides, I have a unique viewpoint into what technology can do for both sides of the industry. I would say I'm most interested in prop tech. I think just because I went to Columbia for engineering degree, and as an engineer, you're always trying to determine the problem, identify it, and then figure out the solution. And technology is really that next wave that that people are using to find the pain points in companies, as you mentioned, and now find the solution for it. So I've noticed that, you know, it's an industry that's really taking construction and bringing it to the next level and being able to implement what a lot of other industries are. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And great point, Jarrett. As an engineer myself, I found myself early in my career drawn to technology. I tell people it's because I was lazy and didn't want to do any more work than I absolutely had to. But I think it was just the way that my brain worked, is that I just always felt that there was a better way. And why should we be stuck doing things the way that we always have been doing them? Aaron, I'm going to kick us off with kind of the first question to you, because you alluded to it a little bit in your intro, but what are some of the things that you're most excited to see about happening in this space right now with technology? I mean, you mentioned a bit about the fact that it's this convergence and the actual adoption. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And, you know, I think for me, as we routinely start these conversations with a look at just how poor the productivity improvements have been in the construction industry. And, you know, that is sort of often recited formula for why we are at such a need for these implementing these new technologies. And I always have to sort of remind folks that I think there was some sound rationale for why productivity gains have not been more significant in this industry. We do remember that construction is one of the most dangerous industries on the planet. The construction site in your background, Chris, is rife with dangers. And so over the last 50 years, we've not made a lot of progress because we've had this continually improving focus in our regulatory environment on improving the health and well-being of folks at the job site. And so I just always use that as sort of a backdrop to say why we are where we are. But my own personal view, and the reason why I'm so excited about this moment today and this convergence that's happening, is I think we can start to improve the health and well-being of the folks on the job site at the same time we're enhancing productivity using these same technologies that I mentioned, when we can understand reality as it's being developed on the job site, we can track and trace the movements of employees to look for repetitive stress injuries or overheating, things like that, that can then allow us to make better decisions about people on the job site. We can at the same time make them healthier and get home safe at the end of the day, and improve productivity. So some of the things that I'm really interested in are some of the wearables technology that we're seeing deployed on the job site to allow that, especially in this moment of COVID, where health and well-being of people is paramount, and their safety is what they think about every day. And so that's where I see a lot of our clients really using this imperative to create a safe environment to enhance and accelerate the deployment of some of these types of wearable technologies, which I think can really make a meaningful impact on productivity and health and safety. So that's just one. I know our panel has probably others. I'll probably offer the comment or question to you, because I could talk for a lot longer about it and many of the other technologies that are emerging, but that's the one that really gets me excited.
Awesome. Yeah, I get pretty excited about wearables too. I think there's a lot that can be done with them. And like you mentioned, it's safety and performance and opportunity kind of all wrapped up into one. So I think there's a lot to be done there. Now, Kalia, you come from a little bit different background. So I'd be interesting. Are there other things that you're more excited about in the construction tech space?
I mean, I think there's a bunch of stuff I'm really interested in construction tech right now. I would say I also think wearables are an exciting, I think they have a lot of exciting potential impacts. I'm equally interested in reality capture and, particularly the way that I think AI is going to start to be able to guide us in decision making and even capture things that, could be risks, but I think help monitor and increase efficiency across projects writ large. I think AI kind of across the board for construction is a really exciting phenomena. And I would just say, Chris, I tend to think across most major investable sectors, it's almost like there are three different buckets of things that can be invested in. And they are, you can start with things that are like enablement or enhancement of the existing industry. And even with wearables or, site capture, we're still kind of talking about enablement or enhancement. And then there are things that are more hybrid. They're maybe on the rails of the existing industry, but they're doing things different enough that the incumbent industry wouldn't buy them. And then they're truly disruptive approaches. And I think that we're going to see all three of those in construction tech. And so I may be the one of us on the call who's most interested in the like truly disruptive kind of blow it up investing opportunities, because I do think we're going to see some of those as well, like, just doing things a completely different way.
Absolutely. And that I get really excited about that space as well, especially not just because I work for a technology provider, but also I've always kind of said like this industry is ripe for a big change, and there's going to be something that's going to come in that is going to force that change. Now, Jarrett, you came from working kind of on the job site with subs and then with owners as developers. As someone who's lived and kind of breathed this every day, are there things that you're excited about from a technology space?
Yeah, I think one of the things we hear all the time, other industries using technology. So, for example, what was just mentioned about the virtual reality, I think drones as well. We hear it in the news all the time. Just technology that's going to disrupt the way things have always been done. So, with drones, being able to use it for special inspections, looking at similar to your background, looking at a slab that's ready to be poured and verifying slab edge conditions and penetrations and or doing inspections on a facade, something that was done manually by a person, going back to the risk of safety and everything. Instead of hanging from a scaffold, you use a drone. So now you're able to capture these images and using AI technology to compare that to the drawings and what was meant to be done, to make sure it matches. That technology I'm excited about, because you're being more productive, but you're also avoiding rework, which is another big cost impact that we find owners spending a lot of money and time on. So I think that is what excites me. Something that really affects the whole industry, and just bringing it into construction from other industries and bringing some more attention.
Yeah, I'll throw two pieces to that. I still remember the first project that I was on, having to go up a swing stage as a 20-year-old kid who had never been at height before, 13 stories up in the air, looking at welds on some structural steel, going, I'm not real comfortable with this. There's got to be a better way, right? Imagine 15 years ago if I had had a drone and I could have flown it right up there and just taken a look at that. Now, I played some video games in my day. I probably could have flown that thing right up to where I needed to without having to get on that swing stage in the middle of the Baltimore winter, trying to throw a harness on around it. The other piece that I think is really interesting there is really focusing on automating the tasks that are repetitive, that don't add value to the project, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much of that we do because we need to do it, whether it's regulatory, whether it is something that just is information that someone else needs. So if we can do anything we can, whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, faster capture, those are all great things that can be automated, that then allow us to do what our value adding activities, like find the deficiencies, right? Manage the project better, accelerate the schedule. Those are all value adding. And we just spend so much time, I think, just tracking down information, that's kind of exciting that we can automate a lot of that now. Now, I want to encourage the audience to ask questions, and I've already seen a couple come in. I'm going to try and weave these in throughout the day. So we'll see how good of a moderator I really am, and if I can take control and add some of these things in. So one of the questions I saw come in was, Aaron, you were talking about, getting firms to adopt new technology, and this is perfect lead into the next question I was going to go into anyways, but what are some of the major challenges you're seeing firms face with alignment, both internal and external, with existing technologies and new technologies? And I'll add my spin onto that, which my question is how are you seeing folks drive adoption of these new technologies as well?
Yeah, boy, there are no shortage of challenges. And the most significant of all is the fact that most construction contractors are fairly thinly capitalized. That is the history of construction, is two guys in a truck, right? So low barriers of entry, low margins, very limited capital at risk. So, not a lot of excess capital to deploy. And so the biggest challenge that we've seen over the years, although I think this is changing, we're going to talk more about that, but is this view that technology commands a substantial amount of capital. And so I saw the question was relating to dealing with existing systems. The one best way to kill an innovation program is by telling the CFO it's going to cost a lot of money. And so that right there is where I think, from an adoption perspective, what we're seeing be much more effective is this idea of enhancement. Clearly, you talked about it earlier, just about these sort of incremental innovations that occur. The other term I liked was democratized innovation, where clients like of ours are really trying something at a location, on a job site, it working, and then all of a sudden everybody else wants in on it, as opposed to a top-down, everybody has to use this technology or else, so the approaches to adoption, we're seeing a lot much more be about incremental innovation, pilot programs, and again, this democratized approach to adoption of those things really is the way we're seeing it sort of spread through an organization, because that then becomes business decisions with immediate ROIs to people on the ground closest to the project, as opposed to a top-down approach would be. And so that's maybe a little bit on where the question was coming from. And the other aspect is really the thing that I thought was really interesting about adoption generally is We did a study in 1998. There were 60 contractors around 2018. Sorry, I missed a few years there. 2018. Well, we surveyed 60 global contractors around the world, and 98% said that digital would be critical to their future success. Yet only 1/4 of those people who responded could name who in the organization was responsible for deploying these initiatives and this innovation, these digital innovations. And so we're seeing a significant ramp up in people with titles like Chief Innovation Officer, Chief Data Scientist. And so we're seeing companies really invest in roles whose job it is to think about the future, to demo these technologies. And it's given folks like Procore and other technology companies someone to go to bring the message, do the demo, and really look at them as the ones that can really help sort of get the message out about what that ROI can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I my last job before I came over to Procore was I was the vice president of operational excellence, right? That was a role that didn't exist before we decided to say, hey, someone needs to take charge in making sure that we're doing our jobs the best that we can, right? And we didn't have a CIO or an innovation officer, but it was kind of all wrapped up in that operational excellence idea. Now, Jarrett, I wanted to ask you, from what you've seen, who are adopting the technologies? Are you seeing more of that bottom up approach or more of the top down approach of kind of the investment and the adoption and technologies?
Sure. First, I'd like to just plug CREtech. I think Michael and his team have done a great job of identifying the fact that smaller companies that don't have that innovation officer or that department are able to provide that service for companies that are looking to make that step into what technology should we be using and helping them really determine that. So I think I applaud the whole CREtech group for seeing that as a need for some companies. But I would say, coming from the owner's side, I see it as more of a top-down approach. As Aaron had mentioned, the contractors are strapped for cash sometimes or capital. So I see the owners that are really going out there and taking the risk and really implementing it across their projects. They seem to have more power. They're taking the risk if there's a schedule delay or increased cost on a project because they want to implement something new that they think will eventually save the project money or time, and then would help the contractors or the team and project as a whole. And since they're organizing the project from the top down, all the parties involved, I think that's where it's getting the most adoption from.
Awesome. I want to shift gears slightly. So one of the questions that came in is kind of perfectly aligned with some of the other things we're going to talk about is owners purchasing construction technology, right? Are they a buyer? Should they be a buyer? What should they be buying, right? And I know somebody asked, what are some of the things that they should spend their money on to get their best value, right? I'm also, who are the buyers inside of those organizations? Now, Kalia, I know you had some perspective on, are owners actually buying ConTech, or is it more just an investment in prop tech, which is very popular right now as well?
Yeah, and I would definitely look to Jared and Aaron for their insights on this as well. But from speaking to the ConTech entrepreneurs and kind of, I think I have a pretty good bird's eye view of a lot of the way the space is evolving. I think it's mixed. And, what I actually see is different companies are coming in at different points in the ecosystem. And we certainly haven't yet seen owners at scale really engaging with ConTech as a space where they're making serious investment. I mean, what I see is that there are a bunch of owners who have gotten much more serious about prop tech writ large, who now have, the chief innovation officer or someone internally who's working on technology across their entire portfolios, and that they're almost like ConTech is now coming into view, but it's a relatively recent focus for a lot of the big owners. Whereas, I think some of the major GCs are really pushing much harder right now on investing in innovation and building out their own internal venture wings or becoming LPs in specialized venture funds. Like, I can't think of a single owner who's invested in a specialized contact venture fund. And frankly, like, I don't know if we'll see an owner make that sort of investment. But I do think that owners are going to be really interested in things, like site capture is a great example. You can see obvious benefits for an owner. It's never has there been a more acute time for an owner to want to be able to do remote monitoring of a site, right? But I think that it's going to continue to be the case that that's a real value add for an owner. If you can actually map images that align to plan and they're digitally accessible and you can like searchable in a Google style search, and you can go as far as searching like drywall completion level, and AI will tell you what level of completion you're at with drywall in a certain area, and then like pull up the photos that align with that. I mean, that's giving you a much greater level of confidence as you release payment tranches, as you sort of review a plan. And I think that we're going to see that type of technology come into every aspect of the construction process. I think we're going to see AI touch, the BIM, the design, like iterative design, planning, figuring out how to most effectively manage supply chain. Owners are going to be involved in that in terms of from a cost optimization perspective. We're going to see obviously site capture, oversight. I think we're also going to see a lot of innovation in payments in general in the construction sector. So I do think owners are going to be involved in a lot of almost like the key areas of enablement, but they're never, in my opinion, going to be the core adopters of the technology, right? It's going to have to be the GCs and the subs who are bought into engaging in working that way. And obviously, at a certain point, if you're a GC, you have a deep relationship with an owner, the owner is telling you to use something, you're not going to say no. But you can find ways to kind of hold off if you're not bought in, right? And then, I think the other big question that I would just raise again is owners are going to potentially become the people who have to invest or not in these truly disruptive technologies. So owners would need to buy into like 3D printing walls or modular systems or things that basically say we're going to, go around the existing industry altogether. And I think we'll see to what degree they get excited about that stuff and are willing to put their money there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to give Aaron and Jared an opportunity to chime in here as well. One of the questions and comments I saw come in is like, can we name some of these technologies, right? We've talked around the ideas of them. So Kalia was talking quite a bit about reality capture, and there's a lot of great solutions. And I wouldn't be the partner guy at Procore if I didn't bring up all the partners that we had that did that, right? So, so if you're looking for those tools for capture of those site photos, right, to speed that process up, to give you that insight, hey, how much work is done out in the field from remotely, you have partners like Struction Site and OpenSpace and Hollow Builder, MultiVista, all great partners that have, that really work with 360 photos and 360 walks and video to capture a lot more quickly. Then you can back yourself away and you can go, hey, I want to be more high level than that. And I want to go into maybe the drone space like Jarrett was talking about before, and companies like Drone Deploy that have done really great things with aerial imagery tracking. So if you're doing big projects where there's a lot of ground to cover, or those facade inspections. I know Drone Deploy last week launched their ability to do facade inspections and pre-programmed facade inspections. And there's another company called SiteAware to look at that does that similarly as well. These are all great technologies, and that's a space that's got a lot of action in it right now as well. And then the other piece is, I know Kalia mentioned, compare it to the drawings, compare it to the model, what's happening, right? So then we have players like Avere that are doing that against a 3D model versus the actual point cloud or the laser scan to say, hey, this is the work that's been installed. And if you have a model and you're doing regular scans, you can get updates so you can approve those payment applications. So, as we're all working more remotely, right, and we maybe can't get out to job sites as quickly as we used to, this gives you a lot more of a sense of control and a lot more visibility and transparency into those projects there as well. Now, Aaron, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I know you were itching to go, but I had to get a few of those names in there. Go ahead.
No, those are all great examples. And, the thing that, one, you talked about a beer. The other one, last fall, I was in London and met with Stuart Maggs, the CEO of Scaled Robotics. And they're doing, LiDAR capture. He had his PS3 remote control, moving around his robot, taking LiDAR measurements. But, what he talked about is what you did is, it's not so much that there's robots crawling around the site and capturing it. It's what they do with the data. And now that they've gotten that tech to get to within a millimeter tolerance on these LiDAR scans, you can then bring the BIM model into that and do this comparison that highlights, when things aren't on spec. If you thought that a building project was about 20% on average rework and waste, imagine the savings you can start to create by spotting those deficiencies in the as-builts as they're being built, as opposed to like when we do them now on inspection. And so that is incredibly costly to fix things. And so that was one, example. But I do think, and clearly, I think you had it right. Owners do need to get involved here. And the thing we haven't mentioned yet is, and I know we're a little bit on the building trades side of things in the sense of commercial construction, but the largest owner on the planet is governments, right? And so where we have seen the adoption of technologies being mandated in places like the UK and Northern Europe, Brazil, Chile, is where BIM is a required element of all government procurements. We don't have that in the US. Obviously, today, that is one of those things that could be a real driver for adoption if that does become a requirement, because we all know the power of digital twin, IoT sensing, this whole holistic cost model for whole life asset usage is got to be critically important to governments and owners alike. And so I got to think that that's really on the precipice of a lot of investment and focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Jarrett?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think BIM and having that model for the owners that own these properties and manage them later, it's so important to have a as-built, model afterwards whenever there's renovations. I mean, owners are owning buildings for 100 years or more, and how many times are they being renovated or a new tenant's coming in? So just to be able to give the power back to the owner and the team that's managing the properties to be able to now go and see what was there, what was in the slab, what was in the walls to renovate it. And then I think also when you look at owners on commercial spaces, the ability, the technology that's in even giving the VR to the leasing side, or I know it's less construction, but being able to market the space or just show progress for tenants that are interested in going into the space. A lot was done. I know the importance of renderings all the time. We're doing construction projects. You're always looking for, let the architect come up with a rendering. So now we could show what that looks like, whether it's residential or commercial, to sell the product. So now instead of engaging an architect to do that, you're doing walkthroughs with virtual headsets because you want to give them a real life capture into what the space is going to look like finished. So especially, I mean, I was on a few residential projects that they were implementing that because they wanted people to walk around a empty job site that we didn't even finish. We barely finished the model, but they wanted to see every apartment and exactly what apartment they were doing. So I think there's a lot of benefit to the owners as well.
Chris, can I just say something quickly? I think a way to sum it up is historically, there's been not just, the perception of inefficiency in construction. And I love your point at the beginning, Aaron, about health and wellness and the significant progress that's been made in some areas that we might not see. But I think there's also been a perception of like opacity in construction, that it was just really hard to understand what was going on, and that like no one really knew what was going on end to end. And I think, a lot of what tech is going to do is bring more transparency to the entire process, and no one benefits from that more than owners, right? Like if the entire construction process were completely transparent and the owners could actually say with confidence at every point along the value chain, like, I know that, the price that I'm getting is transparently the best price for this material, or that I'm paying the right price for labor, or that the amount of work that I've been told is done is actually the exact amount of work that has been done, and that like the plan that I've been pitched is exactly the right plan to build this building. Like, in all of those ways, I think data and tech are going to massively improve the owner experience. But, in full, like the challenge is that many of the ways that people have created value historically in the construction industry is in that opacity. So I think it's going to challenge the entire industry to think about where they're adding value and how they're adding value in a much more transparent system.
I couldn't agree more clearly. We talk about this all the time. Trust is non-existent in the construction industry. In fact, it's why they're called contractors, right? The whole point is to try to shift risk, and that creates a lack of trust between the supply chain. That's why I am interested to see the development of integrated project delivery systems. A little bit, we've taken some hits on that. There's been a lot of poor project execution around design build, which could have been a big step towards that more, collaborative supply chain. But I think in the more recent time, I've been a part of working groups and the like, where we're seeing a lot more collaboration today than we may have done 4 years ago. And as you point out, there are emerging technologies that are going to require that. Think about blockchain. We designed an entire blockchain solution to handle a construction project and design approvals and things, but it was easily a year too early. Nobody really thinks that that's a way that this can be done or will be done in the next few years. So I think we do have some time, but these technologies are there. It's just going to be about adoption and about, sort of getting owners and contractors to collaborate more.
And I think the one other thing I would just mention is that the group that I think is potentially going to start to put pressure on owners is lenders and insurers. I actually think that lenders and insurers may move faster than owners themselves in understanding the value of these technologies to accurately price projects and risk, and start to pressure the owners to adopt these technologies so they can more clearly understand what's going on.
Yeah, we're already seeing that, right? In our industry, we're seeing organizations like Travelers and AXA XL that are the insurers for a lot of these projects say, hey, if you're willing to use one of these technologies that's in our list, we will give you an enhanced policy, right? In the case of AXA XL, or in the case of Procore, if you are a Procore customer and you're using Procore to manage your jobs, we're willing to give you a discount on your policy, which is huge, right? Because then they go, oh, well, the owner goes, that's a lot of money I spend on insurance every year. If I can use some of this technology and you're willing to pass along a discount because you believe that the projects will be run more smoothly or the transparency will be there, I think that's huge. I wanted to circle back to one thing that I thought was really interesting, and there was a question that came in around it too, was this transparency and collaboration, right? We've talked a lot about like some pretty emerging technologies, drones, blockchain, AI, ML, but there's still just a lot of development around like just standard like blocking and tackling project management happening in the industry as well. And Jared, I'm interested to get your perspective on, like, you spent quite a bit of time working on both sides of the fence. Like, How has that enabled both either just projects to be run more efficiently from an owner's perspective, more transparency into what's actually happening on the job, and or one of the questions that came in was, is how are we enabling the industry to bring up, new contractors and new organizations to be as efficient or more efficient so that you can use, you can spread the wealth around a little bit more too?
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to the productivity of the workers, and having that information there. I think project management is about collaborating with everyone, having transparency, making sure everyone has the information available, and then there's a lot of communication. So Procore has certainly done that, very, very well, and helped a lot of contractors. And it's giving, with the communication, it's and the transparency, it's giving owners more insight into what's going on the job site, where there are hiccups or where there's a block in the project that answers need to be given, whether it's an RFI or there's a cost holdup on a project. They need to be addressed to keep going with the project. So the transparency is not only helping the contractors get work done, it's also documenting what the decisions were made, which is always important when you don't want to go back later and start pointing fingers. And then it's giving the owners the opportunity to see that this is an issue that needs to be resolved immediately. So project management software definitely, with the transparency, helps move the project along.
Yeah, and if I may, Chris, because I maybe want to turn this into a question for you. One of the things that I was interested in seeing, Dodge Data did a study last year that looked at the adoption of project management information systems. Obviously seeing that a lot. And of those surveyed, 90% of the contractors who responded said that they were required by at least some of their owners to use the owner's project management information system. And about half of those respondents said that they were having to duplicate the efforts because they had their own different project management information system, which obviously creates single point of truth problems, reconciliation problems, and just inherent inefficiency. But so there is some level of need for standardization or somehow a convergence. But I'm curious your thoughts on that study.
Yeah, so this is an area I've had a lot of passion around since long before I was at Procore, as a original founding member of a group called the Construction Progress Coalition that focuses on exactly this pain point, which is duplicate entry, right? Like, we have to do the same work multiple times. And it's one of the reasons that I came to Procore was because our true goal is to connect everybody on a platform that they can work on and share the data, not necessarily have to duplicate it 3 or 4 times. It's one of the reasons that we have a completely wide open API. It's one of the reasons that we built our Procore Connect product, which allows people to share RFIs and daily logs and things that they commonly work on across project lines. And that's really, like, in my opinion, like, one of the biggest drains on productivity is like I said, doing extra work with adding no value to the project. What additional value does it create for you to put something in 2 or 3 different systems, right? So, I'm very optimistic on what the things that we're doing. And even with, let's be honest, even with solutions that could potentially be seen competitive to us, with having people realize that there can be integrations built. We've had customers that have built integrations with eBuilder. We've had customers that have built integrations with other project management solutions so that they could continue to use what is efficient for them and then still meet the requirements of an owner that's making a requirement on that. So I think that's, one of the things we're going to see is the opening up of that collaboration. The transparency allows that data to move, and then it becomes a data ownership conversation, which I know is another question in the Q&A. I'm watching them. By the way, kudos to the audience, because you're the most active audience and it's the most questions I've seen in a while. So you're really putting me to the test today. But I do want to get to one other thing that this also does tie to a question. So obviously I was thinking the right way when I set up these questions is, how are we seeing this investment in construction technology, like, affecting talent, either bringing talent to our industry, bringing talent to construction tech? Kalia, I'm going to start with you, but I want to give an opportunity for everybody to talk about that a little bit.
Guys, I keep having this mute issue today. So, I think one of the most exciting things from a pure tech perspective, I think of any sector specific investing as basically being a three-legged stool, right? So to have a really solid stool, you need to have a robust investment sector, which increasingly we have around Contech. You need to have an engaged world, incumbent industry, which increasingly we have too. And then you need to be attracting top entrepreneurial talent into the space. And I think actually we've lagged a little bit in attracting top entrepreneurial talent into the construction space because I think it seemed complicated and difficult for people to find their way in, but you're increasingly seeing it coming. And that's really exciting to me. And I think, around things, let's say like site capture, we have a number of really strong CEOs who in most cases had some construction background, but then are people actually, like Chris, you or Jarrett, you who had engineering backgrounds thought, I've seen tech do this better. I'm going to find a solution. And then we're able to hire like top development teams to work on these really gnarly, cool problems that we're facing, for which AI and different types of visual interpretation. And, I don't want to focus too much on site capture, even though I do think it's one of the coolest and most exciting, sort of most advanced areas. But, estimation and takeoffs is seeing a bunch of really interesting stuff happening. Actually, labor planning and deployment is seeing a bunch of really interesting stuff happening. Safety and risk assessment is seeing a bunch of really interesting stuff happening. And interesting in terms of like sophisticated, gnarly, cool tech solutions where you're getting really strong development talent to come in and try to use like deep tech to solve some of the issues. So I think that is going to be a transformative thing, that top development talent is getting more and more interested in our area. And then I think the parallel internally is that, it's going to, that talent is different from the talent of the like humans who actually build buildings. But to my point before about opacity, like, I think we're going to have to, everyone in the construction industry is really going to have to think about like, what is the value that I'm bringing? What do I do? What do the people who work with me do that is the most valuable? And I think for the labor force, that's going to be a big, like, it's possible that there are things that machines are going to do better than humans at construction sites. And then there are going to be a lot of things that humans do better than machines, but figuring out what that is and positioning yourself and your team in one of those places is going to be really important.
Absolutely. Aaron?
It's a complicated problem because like our own firm, for example, over the past 3 years, we've hired 66,000 people who classify as either a technologist or data scientist. I mean, that is a significant investment in our own business around this, which is competing for all the talent that we're all talking about here. And when you have, sort of shallow pools that to draw from, it makes it incredibly difficult. And there are a lot of very talented people in construction. It is a very substantial employer across the US and globally. And so there will be this drive for those people to continue to hire into this. But I'll also see how these tech companies and firms like ours are going to really probably supply a lot of that talent to the market over time as a service, just because the scale with which you need to have it at hand isn't something a normal construction company can really take on. I shouldn't say that go too far, because what we forget about are engineering firms, and engineering firms have a tremendous amount of technical talent. So when I talk about contractors, I'm talking about contractors. We had plenty of engineering talent that really are solving some of the world's largest problems. They're early adopters of technology in terms of building information management systems, digital twins, and things like that, and solving these problems. So a huge source of talent, but there again, the war for that talent will continue because we're not turning out as many engineering grads as we once were. There's a huge layer of retirements that are coming. in the engineering world as well. And so it's only going to put more and more pressure on this labor pool. And so I'm a little nervous on how that's really going to be an impediment to this adoption rate that we're seeing.
Jarrett, any thoughts there?
Yeah, not many, but just construction globally employs about 7% of the workforce. And I think just the workers themselves that are on the construction site doing the physical labor, I think the skill there will change as well. I think with more prefabrications, trying to do more in a controlled environment in a shop. So some companies are, working towards that, and less on the job work, more in controlled factory. I think the workforce will get more skilled, and I think they'll have to adapt to that. And it's not just, and I think that'll improve the quality as well of all the work that's going on, as far as the workforce labor itself.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. I think it's really going to be a function of people's roles changing rather than jobs going away or things like that. People are going to move to working in manufacturing style production areas. That's for sure. The other thing I am pretty excited about is, just to see some of the talent that has come into our industry, mainly because I think they see it as so opportunistic. Some technology people, developers, engineering talent, things like that, look at other industries and they go, I can go fight against 75 other companies trying to do the same thing to make a 1% change in somebody's day-to-day life. Or I can go over to this industry over here, construction, with everybody seems to have forgotten about for the last 50 years. And I can make 10, 20, 30% gains and be fighting a lot less people off to do it. So I've seen some really great talent come into our industry, both on the construction side and also on the technology of construction side, because they're like, hey, this is such a green field. There's so much to play here, and there's so many problems to solve. Like, there's enough problems for all of us to go after, which is kind of interesting as well. All right, so we have about 8 minutes left, and there are like 25 questions. So I'm going to do my best to try and get to a few of these, and then make sure I leave a minute or two for Bradford at the end. So one of the things that I think got mentioned earlier, Kalia or Aaron, I'm not quite sure which one of you mentioned it, but was around some technology around the supply chain. Anybody care to mention anything that they think is really making some changes in that space?
I'll just offer that one of the things clearly I talked about earlier was the total disruption of construction and this pre-modularized, construction methods and the required technologies that underlie that to be able to produce these assets. That really, CREtech, for example, is really, they had to entirely change the supply chain in order to achieve their goal of reducing substantially the cost of a building. So that has tremendous sort of supply chain ramifications, but that's a really disruptive, that's a very difficult asset to build. And so I think there's still more to go when it comes to a true widespread disruption of the supply chain. One of the things that we have seen, at least as COVID hit the industry, is the dislocation of some of these supply chains and the reliance that we have. Up to 30% of the building products used in the United States are sourced from China. And so when the pandemic hit, there were plenty of circumstances in which the construction schedules were impacted, delayed, and that's caused companies sort of rethink those supply chain decisions about whether there should be reshoring some of that supply, but that has a consequential impact on cost and their ability to be competitive. And so I'm really interested to see how COVID really affects the distribution system in the United States. And then the last thing I'd just say is blockchain. I think blockchain has a tremendous opportunity to improve trust, improve the understanding of real-time information. And so I'm anxious to see how that could be effective in really improving the outcomes for owners.
And I would just add, I think to Chris, to Aaron's point, we are seeing kind of two different things right now. One is we're seeing enabling technologies like I would say equipment and supply almost marketplaces or alternatives being developed. And I'm thinking like equipment share or equipped crowdsource. And then we're also seeing like sort of supply chain or enablement, like the one that's coming to mind for me right now is Reno Run. But then I think we're going to see things, whether it's Katera or, I've heard of a couple of, I guess it's public that the Sharples brothers are working on Assembly, which is this sort of really around streamlining the supply chain in a kind of auto manufacturing type way for mid-rise buildings. And so, I think you're going to see both. And I think what we see in other industries is like the faster these alternatives get adopted, the more pressure there is on the incumbent industry to adopt enabling technologies that will allow them to compete. So, I think like the jury is out whether people perceive Katera as a real threat to the incumbent industry. But I think we're going to see more and more like genuine alternatives to the existing supply chain or the existing way that things are built. And I think that'll put pressure.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question. Jarrett, I'm coming your way with this one. From what you've seen and sitting in the seat that you sit, are there ways that owners can encourage contractors to use more technology on their projects, or is the only way to encourage them is to require them and put it into the specs?
That's usually the most direct way. We're implementing this, you have to do it. I mean, a lot of, I think, technology, you see it with, security systems. You try to encourage the design team to put in different specs in their drawings. And when you're building on a lobby or apartment buildings and you want to change the way instead of a key card. So you work with the design team to come up with different solutions. Then it has to get implemented. But I think it's also convincing the contractors that it would save cost and time and it benefits everyone. A lot of the project costs are passed on to the owner. So the owner likes to push it onto the contractors because they're seeing the benefit. So I think if you could save in general conditions from, a construction management firm by doing something more efficiently, the owner is going to try to push that. But you also have to make the contractors believe as well that it's beneficial to them.
Awesome. Well, we've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to leave some time for Brandon to make his closing remarks. For those of you who asked questions and we didn't get to them today, I'm going to do my darndest to respond to all of these via email with the panelists if they're game for that as well. If you did it as anonymous, if you want to just write your name and email in there, otherwise we won't be able to get back to you. But we definitely will do our best there. I want to say thank you to all the panelists today. Great conversation. We certainly didn't have any lack of content. I think there's a ton that we can do here as well with technology in our industry. Brandon, I'm going to give you hand it back over to you Bradford, I'm going to give it back to you to make the closing remarks.
Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, no, the closing remarks, just want to thank everyone once again for joining us today. And thank you everyone to the consultants and guest speakers for your insights as well. Once again, just want to remind you to register for our upcoming events by going to CREtech.com/events. Thank you to all.